of the fisherman is to become wealthy by catching lots of fish. They have to pay a price. They have to go through their own and then ashakti bhava prema. So in our path, at the beginning there's some faith. Then there's the sadhu sangam, the association of devotees. The devotees from the parampara, from the time of Krishna, and those who represent the parampara today. Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya, he gave us the wisdom, the knowledge of the essence of all the acharyas of all the paramparas. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy in fullness. And we're all trying to share that with each other. That's sadhu sangha. And we learn the process of these 9 processes of bhakti, especially hearing, chanting, remembering. And as we're doing, there will be so many obstacles that will come. But Krishna tells in Gita, Vyabhashayatmaka buddhir eke hakurunandana, bahushaka hyanantascha buddhayo vyabhashayana. Those who are on this path must be resolute in purpose. Their aim must be one. Otherwise, we're many-branched. If we can be as determined and resolute in purpose to love Krishna, to please Krishna, to serve Krishna, to achieve love for Krishna, as the fisherman is to get some fish, then we will attain perfection. That determination, we have to have that determination because there will be so many waves in the form of so many obstacles from within and without, but we keep moving forward. And when we actually attain that raganuga state, that higher state, then everything becomes pleasurable. So if we want something great, we must know that it takes sincerity. And ultimately, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught us that the obstacles on our path are actually necessary for us to actually sincerely take shelter of Krishna. To make what apparently is unfavorable, favorable. That is the art of bhakti. And that's what Srila Prabhupada gave us. Whatever may be, even if we have difficulties, even if we slip and fall, even if we fall off the boat, just get back up and keep going. And we need each other to help each other to reach that state. Harinam Sankirtan. It's the most powerful and the most merciful blessing in all of creation. That Krishna has come within the sound of his names to help us to cross this ocean of material existence and go deep into Karuna Sindhu, into the ocean of his love and his compassion. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Is there any questions? Someone could select who to give the microphone to. Who has the microphone now? Okay. You can be the selector.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for a very beautiful lecture. Maharaj, when we are also in our boats trying to get out into the ocean, as per the analogy you gave, uh, we keep facing these waves keep hitting us, anarthas keep hitting us, and after some time we kind of get used to the waves. It's yeah, for some time we fight against them, and we try to fight that, okay, I will not allow this to affect me, and I keep moving forward. After some time we can become a little complacent, or we can become kind of, okay, I think I can't fight these waves anyway, let the boat just move along, and I keep rowing. But it's not with determination I'm rowing forward. It's just that, okay, let me see how it goes. We don't move it the same determination that we have when we are early in Krishna consciousness. So how do we kind of break out of that complacency, that relaxation that kind of sets in after some years? We kind of start cruising and not really making an effort to row fast and move forward towards the goal.
Hare Hare. Actually, it's not necessarily as bad as I made it sound. Krishna consciousness is very nice. It's Kevala Anandakanda. Simply joyful. But if those waves do come, we have to be willing. We have to be willing to have integrity. And in Krishna consciousness, if we have nice association, advanced association, if we have good Krishna conscious friendship, and we are taking shelter of our sadhana in Krishna, then actually even when the waves do come, it's a happy experience. Because we have such a good cause. Yes? That's why association is so important. In good association, even the highest waves are pleasant to pass through, more or less. Because we're reinforced by the association of others who are supporting us. Yes? But there's something else that I saw in Puri. There's something called an undercurrent. How many of you experienced that? This is a different analogy. Because for a boatman, going into the deep sea is the goal. But for someone who's going to bathe in the sea without a boat, going to the deep sea means death. Yes? So from a swimmer's perspective, the waves come. And then after the waves, an undercurrent that is pulling you underneath. And could cause you to, once you get there, then you can't get back. Yeah? If the undercurrent pulls you back out into the sea, you can't get back. It's very dangerous. Many people drown there. So what is that undercurrent? Let me think of something. The undercurrent is what Bhakti Vinod Thakur explained when there's aparads among Vaishnavas. When there's that unhealthy rivalry that creates aparads between Vaishnavas. That's like an undercurrent that can finish our devotional service for this lifetime. So we have to be very careful about that. The politics based on ego or other anarthas that come between us are like an undercurrent that can ruin everything. So we have to be very careful. Does that answer your question? So we should be determined. But Krishna consciousness is a happy experience, even going through it all, if we're doing it properly. It's not a miserable experience. It's a happy experience. If we understand what the goal is and we have the proper people with us and we're doing the right things to get to that goal. Kevala Anandakanda. Prabhupada was giving that lecture that Krishna consciousness is simply joyful. Chanting, dancing, feasting. And one devotee was asking, what about, my mind and my anarthas and the neighbors and so many things going on? And Prabhupada's reply was, it is simply joyful, chanting, dancing. That was his answer. So we have to remind each other of that. Is there any other questions? Radhe Shyam Prabhu. Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Shyam. Prabhu.
Maharaj, I had a question from the morning Bhagavatam class, Maharaj, but you...
Yes.
Because you didn't have time in the mornings. Thank you for such a wonderful Srimad Bhagavatam class as well as the Sunday feast lecture today, Maharaj. So many valuable things to learn today. So in the morning class, you were saying that Krishna told the cowherd boys to go and tell the Yajna Brahmana's wives that me and Balaram are around somewhere and don't ask for any prasad. On their own if they give, it's all right. But the cowherd boys, to ensure that the prasad will be given, they asked for prasad. So now Krishna was speaking, keeping in mind the sentiments of the wives. He didn't want to demand anything. But the cowherd boys were more on a practical level. So sometimes there is a tug of war between sentiment and practicality. So I had an example. Once your manager asked a particular spiritual master that we are celebrating Rath Yatra in our town and we want some donations. And the spiritual master said, you can approach such and such congregation devotee, maybe he may be able to provide. He is reasonably rich, you can check with him. So he needed about 5 lakhs. So he went to that particular devotee and said, Guru Maharaj just told you to give 5 lakhs. So actually Guru didn't tell him that you should demand 5 lakhs from him. He just said maybe you can check with him. But his way of checking was not proper. And the congregation devotee had to collect some 3 lakhs loan and give, So in this way, sometimes there is a tug of war between sentiment and practicality. Like another example I heard in the morning, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu being persuaded by devotees to eat more. One advantage Lord Chaitanya has is Krishna himself. He can eat any quantity. But sometimes devotees, somebody brings prasad from Vrindavan, somebody brings from Mayapur, somebody brings from Jagannath Puri, and they want to put it in the mouth also, directly.
Tirupati also.
So many devotees spoil their health.
But most commonly they bring from Pune.
Of course, if they allow us to reserve it for the future, it is not a problem. But some devotees persuade that you should eat now. So in this way, we don't want to hurt their sentiment. At the same time, we want to be practical. So Maharaj, my question was, I heard a saying that, we can have our head in the clouds, but we should have our foot in the ground. So when we are faced with such tug of war, I face duality. some kind of dvandva, which one to choose, because either way it's like, we are between devil and deep sea. So I want to check with you how to get the right direction from within at that time. Yes, Maharaj.
Essentially, in Krishna consciousness, the power of discrimination comes through realization. Of course, everything as far as knowledge comes from hearing, from reading the Shastras, from hearing the great souls, by seeing their lives, how they apply it. Great personalities like Srila Prabhupada, they're speaking the Shastra purely. And they're also giving an example of how to apply it through his life. But then how we apply it in these different types of circumstances requires realization. You see, the Gopas are self-realized souls. They're beyond self-realized souls. They're Krishna's most intimate, loving friends. So they very, very deeply knew the purpose of Krishna. Yes? Krishna knew the Brahmins' wives' hearts. And he didn't tell them to say that Krishna's hungry. He just told them to tell the Brahmin's wife that Krishna's close by. Because he knew that's all they needed to hear to bring all their food, without giving them any distress. But the boys really knew Krishna's heart. So they said something beyond what Krishna said, because they wanted to really make sure that they said Krishna's hungry. And the Brahmins' wives came and did. So they didn't exactly disobey Krishna, because Krishna didn't say, don't say this. He just said what they should say. But they had realization of what would be pleasing to Krishna. Yes? So in the example that you gave, where I don't know who said what, we're just speaking in principle, where you're saying a spiritual master has asked a disciple to do something and a disciple did way beyond what the spiritual master and created a burden on somebody. The question is, was that pleasing to the spiritual master or not? If it wasn't, then it wasn't really the right thing to do. Yes? The Gopas, their realization, they actually knew how to please. If we don't actually have the realization to know, before going beyond such an instruction, it's better to inquire and ask. Lord Chaitanya told Lord Nityananda, do not come to Puri next year. Stay in Bengal and preach. And next year, Nityananda Prabhu came to Puri. And he's glorified for all eternity for doing that. Because he knew Lord Chaitanya's heart. In Lord Chaitanya's heart, he really was yearning for the association of Nityananda. When Nityananda Prabhu, Damodar Pandit, Jagadananda Pandit, and Mukunda Dutt all volunteered to Lord Chaitanya, we want to come to South India. And each one of them said, I will be your personal servant. And Lord Chaitanya started chastising them. Yes? He was saying the faults with each and every one of them. Nityananda Prabhu, you want to come? You want to be my servant? What kind of servant? You break my danda? That's my side. I'll give you I say, please hold my danda. And then you break it and throw it in a river? That's a servant. I said to you, bring me to Vrindavan, and you bring me the opposite direction to Shantipur? Damodar Pandit, you're my servant. If I do something that you think is not right, then you chastise me? Jagadananda, I'm trying to be a sannyasi, I'm trying to be a little renounced, and you're giving me sense gratification. And if I don't accept it, you get angry and fast. Don't even bathe. And Mukunda, you don't say anything. But when you see me doing tapasya, you just cry. And when I see your suffering, I suffer more. So Lord Chaitanya is apparently, but Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains, he was glorifying them because he understood their heart. So if we actually really know that this is what Srila Prabhupada or the Vaishnavas want, then yes, we can please them by going beyond. But if it's something that's sensitive, that could actually hurt people or impede the preaching due to immaturity, it's better if we inquire. And that takes realization too. When to inquire and how to actually adjust. And Srila Prabhupada, one time Prabhupada was kind of tired and he was resting, and Prabhupada had devotees preparing a special, Prabhupada himself, I think, prepared a special feast for a very, very important person who was coming to 26 2nd Avenue to his apartment to see him. And Prabhupada was arranging everything because this person was so very, very important. And Prabhupada was preparing himself and all the other devotees were preparing and everything was going on. And then Prabhupada went to take rest and the person came a little early. Prabhupada was waiting. He asked, where he is? He said, oh, he came, but we told him you're resting, so he left. You remember that story? Prabhupada was extremely disturbed. They could never get the person to come back because the person was offended. He was invited by Prabhupada. He came all the way, and then he was told, Prabhupada's resting. You have to. So they did it only to please Srila Prabhupada. But they didn't please him. They displeased him. So it takes some maturity and realization. Does that answer your question? Yes, of course.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, you are very beautifully explaining about Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti and Nishtha and different stages. So, I have heard that our advancement in Bhakti is generally progressive. It's progressive and it's like cumulative. One lifetime we leave somewhere and then next lifetime we continue from there. And in this way we progress. But sometimes we find in our sadhana practice, in our spiritual life, that our consciousness is way high and practically we are floating in bliss and then Krishna gives very deep realizations about many things in spiritual life, and on the other hand sometimes we find ourselves on hands and knees down, practically some very base quality being revealed, which probably Krishna does to make us humble, So, and this kind of sinusoidal wave, this kind of ups and downs, in it doesn't seem progressive because, I once I heard His Grace Dwarkadish Prabhu asking this question some years ago, in one of his classes, Maharaj. But I would like to again learn from you about how Krishna gives sometimes very deep realizations on one particular direction, and in the same life of the same devotee, Krishna can give another realization of something, which brings him down. Like I can tell you one example, Maharaj. We emphasize on certain qualities, like for example, integrity, truthfulness, honesty, and simplicity, and things like that. But sometimes, if a devotee is found holes in the very same things that he is trying to imbibe, live, and teach others, then it raises a very serious question mark in one devotee's life. Because actually, and in the same manner, every devotee also has different type of experiences like this in their own personal lives. So, why does Krishna give such kind of realizations to a devotee of such base qualities, coming on one hand, on the other hand, very deep realizations that Krishna mercifully reveals? Yes.
On the days of low tide, the waves are very less. On the days of high tides, the waves are very high. So the tides change according to this analogy. What Srila Prabhupada taught us is very simple and very practical. We should be steady. Sometimes we feel like we're just on the verge of becoming pure devotees. Just a few more days. Like we have no devotion at all, and we have no faith at all, and we're just being trampled by all these materialistic, egoistic desires. It's the nature of the mind. Yadyaracharati srestas. We should follow in the footsteps of great souls. And what we learn from great souls is their steadiness through every situation. Yato nischalati manas chanchalamashtaram. That whatever way the mind wanders to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly control it by putting it under the control of the self. And that means just adhering to Srila Prabhupada's orders. Just keeping them as our life and soul and remaining steady. Do you know the analogy of the unicorn? Do you know what a unicorn is? Raise your hand if you know what a unicorn is. It's a mythological figure in Western ancient poetry from Europe and the Middle East. A unicorn is a horse with one horn that comes out of the middle of his head, and it's straight. Have you ever seen paintings of unicorns? And the nature of a unicorn is they're totally wild and very destructive. They're untamable, and if you get in their way, they really could cause serious harm to you because they're powerful, powerful horses with a horn in the middle of their head. But when a unicorn comes in contact with a girl who has a young girl who has a pure heart, the unicorn actually becomes completely subdued and puts his head on the lap of the girl and peacefully goes to sleep. But even the greatest warriors cannot combat a unicorn. But a pure-hearted girl is subdued. So the mind is like the unicorn. The only thing that really could subdue the mind ultimately is param dristva nivartate, is experiencing a higher taste. The mind is extremely restless and extreme. Sometimes the mind is feeling elated by our great spiritual progress, and sometimes the mind is feeling incredibly depressed by our lack of Krishna consciousness. So either way, we just carry on chanting our 16 rounds every day as sincerely as possible. Carry on coming to the Mangalarti, doing our puja at home. Carry on by following these 4 regulative principles. Carry on by doing our seva, whatever it may be. Whatever the mind is doing, the unicorn mind is doing, just keep it on the lap of Krishna. Sometimes we're up, sometimes we're down. Sometimes the mind is like a monkey. Sometimes the mind seems like Hanuman. And sometimes the mind seems like one of these monkeys in Vrindavan. It's coming to attack you. Either way, we just carry on with we just remain steady. That was Srila Prabhupada's formula. Just hear Srimad Bhagavatam every day. Read his books every day. Hear his lectures every day. Chant the holy names every day. Don't commit offenses. Carry on with whatever particular service you may have. Live with good character. Just whether you're up or whether you're down. Happiness, distress, honor, dishonor, pleasure, pain, success, failure, advanced, depressed, whatever may be happening, just be steady. That's the way we take shelter. It's very, very practical. And the more we actually learn to be steady in our life, we keep moving forward, whatever kind of waves may come. And sadhu sangam. Rupa Goswami explains, without proper sadhu sangam, we can't really follow these principles. We need good association to keep us steady. And in order to actually advance in good association, we have to be quite humble. Because sometimes the lessons we learn are not what the mind or the ego want to hear. But that's part of sadhu sangam. Does that answer your question? Actually or partially? Huh? Say it in the microphone, please.
Thank you, Maharaj. Yes, Maharaj.
From your clap, it sounds like you're eager for prasad. So, Should we end here?